Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. First preface I have for this video is that we have brought home a new dog. We're trialing her for the weekend to see if she gets along with everybody else. So if you hear dog tags or dog feet in the background, I apologize in advance, but we're just trying to let her get settled in. Next thing is, I have been so bad about using Goodreads lately, mostly because I keep getting locked out of my account and then it never lets me reset my password. So I've about given up on Goodreads. I think I'm going to switch to Storygraph, which I've heard can also recommend books to you very well through the tags system. And you can send an archive of your Goodreads books into Storygraph. So if any of you have experience with using that and have any tips or tricks, or like it or don't like it, please let me know. Follow up to that is that I didn't record in Goodreads what books I read this month. So I've done my best to remember in the rat's nest of my brain what I read. So I think I got most everything. I might have missed something. That's life. I didn't do tons and tons of reading last month. I was still feeling a little bit not myself and recovering from my back surgery, which I'm still recovering from, but I'm feeling much better. And I also was trying to do a lot of fiction writing last month, and I tend to go in phases. If I'm writing a lot, I'm usually not reading as much just because I only have so much time and mental energy. And also, when I do read, I tend to fall back on more comfort style reading for me, so I read a lot of fantasy last month. The first book that I read was part of a read-along with the author, which was cool. It was a reread for me. The third and final book of the Glass Alliance trilogy, which is Southern Sun, Northern Star. I particularly enjoyed following along her reread on Instagram because she gave a lot of insights into decisions that she made, research she had done, documentaries she had watched. I really gained a deeper appreciation for how well researched this trilogy was. Reading it for the second time, it hit just as hard or even harder as the first time. Again, this is one of my favorite trilogies basically of all time, and even though it's shelved in YA fantasy, adult readers can enjoy it. The things that the characters are dealing with, the complexity of all the stuff that's going on, and the age range of the characters really edges into adult. It's pretty political. It's not based in our world history, but it's based upon a whole bunch of different battles that happened between World War I and World War II, and the technology reflects that, but it's in a made-up world with different political reasons for why things are happening. It's almost like the monarchy versus the countries that want to be independent from monarchists, and you have two primary characters that start out one on each side, and is really interesting to watch their journeys. And of course, there's a little bit of forbidden romance, star-crossed lovers that goes on. I can't recommend the series enough. I think that anyone who hasn't read it yet should read it. The first book is called Dark of the West. It looks like this. Book 2 looks like this. Read it. Read it. The next book I read was the one Emily Henry contemporary adult romance that I hadn't read yet, and it was actually her debut, which is People We Meet on Vacation. I really, really loved beach reads, and I enjoyed book lovers a lot. People We Meet on Vacation actually wasn't my favorite of them. I still enjoyed it, but I truly think that each of her books has gotten kind of better and better. It's an adult contemporary romance where these two unlikely friends go on a vacation with each other every year. The story is dual timeline. You have the past, which is showing us their different trips together leading up to an event that happened that is just alluded to, but you don't know what happened that strained their relationship. The present timeline, where they finally, after being estranged for 5 years or so, try to reconnect and go off on a vacation together, but they're still dealing with what happened in the past. But it is a romance, so you have feelings from the past and in the present storyline that kind of blend together. And I did really like it. Emily Henry is a new favorite author, but if you haven't read her and you're looking where to start, I think Beach Reads is still my favorite. The next book that I read was Eclipse the Moon, which is a sequel to Hunt the Stars by Jessie Mihalik, which is a fun science fiction adventure romance story. So this is the second book. I don't think this is a duology because where the story ended up, there's definitely room for a future story, but it'll probably follow a different character. In Hunt the Stars, we follow a bounty hunter and her crew as they take a job for a former enemy that ends up not being what was presented at all, and they get kind of entangled up in this other political issue. In the second book, it follows a crew member that we meet in the first book as their adventure continues. The dynamics of the romance weren't my favorite. I'm not a huge fan of like the overprotective trope, which was really kind of evident in the story, but I still thought the story was fun, and I'm looking forward to whatever Jessie Mihalik writes next. And up to that point, I was pretty much following my TBR for the most part. I mean, there's a lot from the TBR I didn't get to. At that point, I totally went off the rails with the last two books. I don't know what started me searching books by Rebecca Ross, but if you recall, I really liked A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross, which is an adult, lyrical, beautiful fantasy that came out earlier this year, and the sequel comes out, I think, in December this year or January. So I was kind of checking out Rebecca Ross, and I realized that she had published some young adult works, and this one really caught my eye. Dreams Lie Beneath. The book arrived. I wanted to read it immediately. I was very excited for it. It's a standalone young adult fantasy. In this story, the world has been cursed because of some bad things that people did in the past, and because of that curse, people's dreams come alive and walk the streets at night. Not every dream every night, but some really scary ones on the full moon. There are a class of magicians that are trained to take on these dreams and nightmares at the full moon, and they basically control territories that they're responsible for. So when people have dreams and nightmares, they go to them and record them so that they know what they might be facing in the future, and they can figure out ways to counter it before it gets real bad, because the nightmares actually affect the world around on that night, and they can be really deadly. The main character's name is Clementine. She is an apprentice magician to her father. They control a territory that's a small village at the seat of the mountains where the bad thing in the past happened. Two magicians show up and basically challenge her father for the territory and oust him. One of those two magicians stays at her hometown after she and her father are forced to leave. The other one goes back to the city, and Clementine decides that she wants revenge. She's going to disguise herself and become that magician's apprentice and basically try to ruin him. Of course, not everything goes as planned. The plot expands, but I thought it was really clever. I really liked the premise a lot. I liked the characters. I liked the magic, and I overall just really enjoyed the story. So if you're looking for a standalone fantasy, then I recommend Dreams Lie Beneath by Rebecca Ross. And also, if you haven't read A River Enchanted yet, I do have a reading vlog for it, and that's one of my favorites for the year. Last, I technically finished it at the very beginning of September, but I read most of it at the end of August, and that is Scholomance Book 1, A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I kept seeing Scholomance trilogy get recommended and talked about because the last book in the trilogy comes out later this month, and people were talking about how excited they were for it. Magical schools are fun, but it's not a premise that gets me to automatically pick up a book, and I had loosely heard that it's about a magical school that's really deadly and tries to kill you. I thought I'll check it out. Deadly school that tries to kill you, I feel, is an understatement. This story is bonkers and over the top. It is a magic school. There are 4 classes of students, one for each year, and this one follows the main character who is a junior, and basically they have no choice about whether they attend. The people who have mana are basically sucked into it, so it's like 1,000 students per class. So 4,000 students running around this magical weird school that has no professors, and you have to study and try hard because otherwise you will die. Something will happen and the school will kill you, or these malevolent beings that are attracted to want to eat manna, they're constantly infiltrating the school. There's all sorts of different types of them. And if you are not a cautious person, if you're not observant, one of them will hurt you or kill you or eat you. The students are basically stuck in there, and the only time that you leave, if you survive that long, is after your senior year at graduation. The graduation halls, you basically have to survive it because it's the only place in the school that really connects to the outside world. And so that's where a lot of the mals gather because they know the senior class has to go through it, and they're basically lying in wait, and not a lot of people survive. It's like I said, the setup, it's really kind of off the charts, but I decided to suspend my disbelief. It's magic, right? There's good and there's bad, and I just actually had a lot of fun reading the story. The main character is likable in the sense that as you're reading the story, you're really she's kind of sarcastic, but you can understand where she's coming from. The thing is, everyone expects her to be bad. People just look at her, they get a sense about her. One character describes it as, I look at you and it feels like, it's gonna rain. And so people tend to just not like her, and she's a little bit of a loner. But if you're gonna survive in this school, you have to have people to watch your back. I found that the kind of barter system of favors that the students do for one another was really interesting. Basically, throughout the story, it starts at the last few weeks of her junior year, where things in the school start to change and become a little bit more deadly, and she winds up becoming friends with an unexpected person, the White Knight, hero of the school, who's so good at killing these mals. And they sort of have to deal with it together. Plot-wise, there are things happening, but really a lot of the story is just her kind of telling you about the school. And in that sense, it's really info dumpy, but it's really interesting. And I didn't mind just sitting there like being told all this stuff about the school and the history and why things work the way they are, interspersed through her day-to-day as she is trying to survive to become a senior in this crazy pants school. The students, there's not like factions where the students are fighting each other all the time. It's just that in order to survive, they sort of have to stick up for themselves and their allies only. And so the students can be a little bit cutthroat and brutal, not in like a mean way, but in just like a, why can't I survive? And what do I need to do to survive the school? So very dark in that sense, but also entertaining because the main character is funny, sarcastic, and I really liked the interactions that she had with the other characters at the school. So I'm definitely going to keep reading. I already picked up the second book from the library, and then the third book comes out later this month. So who knows, maybe I will end up binging this trilogy, but I'm happy I picked it up. It's been a fun diversion. Those are the books that I read in August. All in all, I didn't spend tons and tons of time reading, but I did enjoy what I read. So I hope that I carry that forth into September. Let me know if you've used Storygraph, what you think about it, any tips. What were your favorite books that you read in August, and did you read any of the ones that I talked about today? Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to support your local library. Thanks.